Hey everyone, Coomber Radio, episode number 327. Tom's back. Tom, hello.
Ben, I'm back. We're on the same show together. It's weird. We haven't done this for ages.
I know, we started to get a load of comments on social media saying, when's the Q&A show back? And I was like, to be honest, when is the Q&A show back? So, apologies for that. Sorry, I've kicked Tom into touch. It wasn't intentional.
Yeah, that's what they all say.
I think we just had a string of guests and things happened, and then I got really busy and was away, so Tom did some of the micro shows and stuff on a Monday. So anyway, it doesn't matter, we're here, we've got some questions, and we're gonna... Tom, mate, let's get into it, man.
Yeah, let's just dive in. I just want to say thanks to everyone that listened to my shows, by the way. I got some really nice feedback, and that's really cool. So yeah, let's dive straight in. So we have our first question, and it goes, Hi Ben and Tom, as a long-time listener, I'm enjoying the new podcasts with split hosts on a few episodes. Tom, you're doing a great job, and your mindset information is great. See? So my question is about TDEE versus real-life results, so total daily energy expenditure versus real-life results. Some background for you. I started my fitness journey at 42, 5'4", 165 pounds, 25% body fat at a guess, with a typical dad bod. I'm now 44, and after 2 years of weight training and nutrition, mostly learned from your podcast, I'm now 155 pounds, 12 to 14% body fat with visible abs. Overall, I'm now very happy with my body shape, etc. I lift 3 times per week, focusing on heavy compound lifts, and I walk as exercise 4 miles 5 times a week. For the first 18 months of my journey, I was eating 1,500 to 1,600 calories a day. I'm feeling fine in myself with energy, I sleep well 7 to 8 hours a night, and I manage my stress. But now I'm eating and maintaining at 1,800 to 1,900 a day for the past 6 months. Using most TDEE calculators, based on my details, they come out at roughly 2,250 calories a day. And as you can see, I'm eating way less than that. I track all my food with MyFitnessPal, and I make sure I eat at least 100 grams of protein, 60 grams of fat, and the rest carbs. Are all the TDEE calculators wrong, or should I be eating more? Would love to hear your advice, but I appreciate you get so many messages for the podcast. No worries if this doesn't make it. Keep doing what you're doing. Thanks, Russ. P.S. Your awesome whey protein vanilla is the best I've tried so far, and I agree with that.
Boom. Thank you, Russ. Well, Russ, your question made it to the show, so let's answer it. So this is where you've done the right thing in becoming more methodical with your nutrition. So a lot of people are happy to freestyle with their nutrition and training and not get more in touch with the science, and that is only going to get you so far. I remember spending a huge amount of my early nutrition and training kind of career just freestyling my nutrition, eating good food, training hard, but it only got me so much results. And you've tightened everything up. You're looking at your calorie intake, you're getting a bit geekier, and to be honest, you've already got some really impressive results. You went from 25% body fat, 165 pounds, to 14% body fat, 155 pounds. That's fat loss and muscle gain. So high five that shit. After that, what happens is we can get caught in the rut of sticking to the same kind of values and not pushing to change those values. So what I mean by that is you've got a certain calorie intake that you've been following and you've been sticking to that. But what your body will do is your body will find a certain level of comfort and efficiency within that kind of window. So what I like to do with all my clients over time is say, hey, okay, we're at this point right now, your body's functioning at a certain level on a certain amount of calorie intake. Let's see if we can push that. And that's where I bring in this phrase, eat as much as humanly possible without getting fat. And what we do is the body tends to adapt somewhat metabolically, but our body adapts just in terms of how well it can perform. So I would argue that your training sessions at the moment would improve in terms of their intensity and your ability to do more, because of your increased calorie load. So if we started to bump your calories up slowly, I'd like to think that we could also start to push you harder in training. So you'd be doing more reps, more sets, maybe, a couple of finishers, maybe adding in more volume, because you've literally just got more in the tank. But quite often we as people will not see these changes because we just get caught in a pattern, and the certain intensity that we're training at, we just get used to. And what you can do to potentially prove this to yourself is go into a different training environment. So let's say you trained kind of a predominantly strength-based now, bit of hypertrophy, and you just went into a CrossFit box. I know this is a different example, but bear with me. And you said, right, I'm going to do a CrossFit workout, and the chances are the volume and intensity will probably double of what you might be used to. And that can then show you like, wow, okay, this is how my body could perform, but actually I couldn't push myself as hard as I want to because I wasn't fueled. And it's workouts and training environments like this which will catch people out very quickly because you have to fuel for the demand appropriately. So I think for me, my key thing is that I would like to see you push your diet, push your training, and essentially for you to find your next level of fitness.
Yeah, I like that. I think that you made some really good points there in that if we do eat a little bit more, then you will find that your TDE will increase a little bit, primarily just because you've got more energy, especially for training. To sort of go a little bit into the question that you asked about TDE calculators and whether they're accurate or not, I think it's a question that a lot of people do have, because it does seem a little bit far-fetched that some calculation online can work out exactly how many calories you need, and there's a lot of truth to that. So the thing is with TDE calculators is they're all based on a few different equations. So there's the Harris-Benedict formula, there's the Mifflin-St. John updated formula, and all of these calculators work off of these. But the thing is, these calculators work to averages, and every individual person will not necessarily be within that average. You are an individual data point, and so there's always going to be some variation. It's really likely that most people will fall within sort of 10% upwards or downwards of whatever a calculator spits out. So you do need to bear that in mind. There's also the fact that potentially, I would say, I know that you are saying here that you do track really meticulously, but I'm very aware that a lot of the research indicates that most people are really quite bad at tracking their food. And of course, this may not be the case for you. It may be the case that indeed your TDE is a little bit lower than the calculator reckons that it should be, potentially because of what Ben mentioned, because if you're under eating, you'll be moving a little bit less throughout the day. Even if you do say you feel energized, there's a chance that you maybe fidget a little bit less. You do fewer steps outside of the walks that you do intentionally. And then also that your training intensity may be a little bit lower. But outside of that, there's a potential that what I see with a lot of people is that they will track their calories really meticulously and accurately for most of the days of the week, but there may be sort of 2 to 3 days where you will overeat those calories a little bit and think, well, this little bite of food doesn't matter, this little extra bit doesn't matter. I had 2 pints that day, but I'm not going to track that, it's fine. And over time, you'll find that over the course of the week, it might be the case that your calories average out at, instead of 1800 to 1900, it might be 2100, and that brings you within that sort of 10% bracket of what the TDE calculator spat out. So it's not unreasonable to assume that potentially it may just be a case of slight misreporting and slightly lower TDE than is estimated. And the answer to that is pretty much what Ben mentioned. Just consider potentially if you want to eat more calories, because at the minute, truth be told, you're saying that you're really happy with the way that your body is, you're really happy with your energy levels. It sounds like you've hit a place where you kind of want to be, which I would say don't change too much. But if you are wanting to change some things, then just bumping your calories up by like 10% and see what happens. Track it on the scales. You may gain a little bit in the first couple of days just through a little bit of water, a little bit of extra glycogen, but it'll soon even out. And then just see how you feel. And then if you want to push it a little bit higher, again, add a little 10%. And then if you find, actually I'm starting to gain weight now and I don't necessarily want to, despite the fact some of that is going to be muscle mass, if your training intensity is as high as I would assume that it is, then you can always cut back again. It's not the end of the world if you do gain an extra pound or two just during this experiment, but it is something that I would say is worth just having a go with and see how you feel.
I think this is a dangerous place for a lot of people to be psychologically as well, because when you get to a certain level in your fitness journey, all the changes are slower, and all the changes actually have to be a lot more data driven, because we're now starting to pick up like the 5-10% that you would change. So when Tom started to talk about changes in energy expenditure, like if you started to become like, you know, a little bit lazier with your intensity, you get caught in the pattern of doing very similar training and moving in a certain way, you might not notice your gradual decline in total daily energy expenditure, because you're just slowly making these habitual decisions that make you slightly more sedentary over time. So you might start, for example, January eating 2,500 calories, but by the time you get to March, you have habitually over time changed your workout intensity in TDEE, and that 2,500 calories no longer serves or matches where you're at, because you've made these small changes, and we just don't notice because they're very gradual over time. So this is where a coach like myself or Tom would sit down with you and say, okay, actually, let's really look at the data here. Let's look at what's changed. Like, do we have any Fitbit data to look at where we can see if your steps have declined? Can we look at your workout log and see if you're now doing like literally the same weight in your bench press as you were doing 3 months ago? And it is actually about unpicking all these little bits and seeing where we can get these meaningful changes, because we all get used to the dramatic changes you experience at the beginning of a journey. You know, I remember when I first went from obese to slim, I went from 16 stone to 12 stone in the space of 4 months. Like, it's an incredibly dramatic change. I went really hard at it, but then the change is obviously a lot slower, and we have to accept psychologically and tangibly that the changes are now going to be slower, and we have to look at the marginal gains, and we have to focus on the different picture. And Tom picked up on the fact that actually perhaps you are quite close to your goal, and it's about adjusting where you're at mentally and emotionally to account for that.
Yeah, I would say as well, what you mentioned there about the training intensity and people not necessarily paying attention to it, I think that's probably one of the most common things that I see when I take on a new client. I don't know many people who haven't been coached to actually deload during their training. So what most people do is they'll train at sort of 70 to 80% intensity all the time, and they will feel like they're training hard because they are putting a lot of effort in. But the thing is, if you're not deloading, generally speaking, that means that either your intensity isn't where you think it is because you don't feel like you need to deload, or you have needed to deload for a long time, and so your intensity has naturally dipped because your training ability is reduced because you haven't recovered. So what I usually recommend people do is just ensure that every sort of between 4 to 6 weeks, you have an easy week in the gym. And what that will allow you to do, although it sounds like, well, I'm going to start being lazy, it's going to allow you to train harder during the other 3 to 5 weeks. And you'll find that your progress picks up a lot, and you'll find that actually, just in related to the question at hand, you will find that your training intensity and therefore your calorie burn does increase a bit across the course of those 6 weeks. So yes, while you do have an easy week, there will be the rest of the time there's a lot more intensity. A really easy way to think about it, I think it was Ali Adams of Physiconomics, who's someone that's well worth checking out if you've never heard of him. He just came up with this really cool, simple infographic to do with how you would plan out a training month. And it's just basically week 1 is quite easy, week 2 is hard, week 3 is really hard, week 4 is too hard, and then week 1 is easy again. And you just keep doing it over that. Keep doing it like that and just loop it throughout the year. And you'll find that your training really does pick up just by having that easy week and planning that easy week. You facilitate much harder training.
I love that analogy. When I teach, I talk about training intensity quite a lot because I know how I think and behave about my training, and I would say I'm quite a disciplined and aware person. So if I'm doing it and I would easily go into the gym and, maybe have an easier session, then, what are other people doing that are maybe less aware of that as a factor? And I think that's where actually maybe there's a point in your journey when you say, do you know what, perhaps I should get coaching for a month. Perhaps I should get a couple of personal training sessions. And this is why I don't program my own training anymore, because I know that I'll fall into a couple of bad habits. And I need a coach to tell me, no, this is how hard you need to work. Like I get my programming done by Andy McKenzie, and I get my percentages through. So yesterday I had to do a certain percentage on front squat, and literally it's bang on every time. He's like, right, I want you to lift 92% on your front squat for 2RM, and literally I was hitting those 2 reps like just. But because my coach knows how I move, my body knows training parameters, so I think it's good to get that insight to make sure that you keep working hard. And I always surprise myself to say, wow, yeah, that was a tough workout today. Actually, if I programmed that for myself, my intensity wouldn't have been as great. It's like the easiest example to look at is if you were to say to yourself, right, I'm going to put burpees in my workout. I bet you 90% of people don't do the burpees, because it's like you almost need someone else to program that kind of sadistic movement for you, or someone else to be looking over you for you to actually do that. Like no one's putting burpees in their own workout.
No, I've absolutely never put burpees in my own workout. I don't think that's ever happened. I have, however, put burpees in other people's workouts. So that's probably something that I should probably do.
You sadist, you.
Yeah. Just like a last point on this question. You mentioned earlier about the place where you are psychologically, where you start noticing that the changes are a lot slower and perhaps you need to change the way you think about things. It kind of reminded us of an article I read like 7 years ago. Like this is a really old article. But I think it was by John Berardi of Precision Nutrition. He wrote it on T Nation, and it's about former fat boy syndrome. I think it was John Berardi. It might have been somebody else. It was on T Nation anyway. And what they were saying is something that I've actually seen play out in so many clients. It's unreal. That people who have been overweight before tend to have like a real pathological fear of gaining fat again.
Yep, that's me.
It's most people who have been previously overweight that I've known, and most people that I've trained. And what you'll tend to find is that those people are more inclined to try and avoid fat gain, especially when they're building muscle. So they're starting out a muscle building journey with the primary aim of gaining as little fat as possible, which is a really limiting mindset to be in, because what you're doing there is you're always going to be trying, at least subconsciously, to either cut calories a little bit, gain weight a little bit slower, maybe I'll do a bit more cardio. And you find that these people spin their wheels all the time. And I think it's just really important for people who have been overweight to realise that it takes a long time to become overweight. You don't go to sleep one day and you're lean with abs, having gone through your weight loss journey, and then you wake up the next day and you're overweight again. It takes a long time for that to happen. So if you are tracking things like taking monthly photos, if you're tracking your waist measurements, you can set yourself parameters and say, right, my waist's 32 inches now. I'm going to stop this when I'm 36 inches, because at that point I know that it'll be time to diet. And you need to realise as well that just because perhaps the first time you lost weight, it took months. Perhaps the first time you lost weight, it was really difficult. You get better at losing weight over time. And also because you build more lean muscle, you are actually more able to lose fat a little bit easier. It's not a huge difference, but your resting metabolic rate will be a little bit higher. And you're also just fitter. So because you are fitter, you're able to train harder, even though you've gained that fat back a little bit. So it'll take a lot less effort. It'll be a lot less difficult. And you can lose fat again. Fat is a temporary storage. It's not a personality trait or anything. It's just a temporary storage of energy that is quite easy to get rid of. And I just think it's really important for people who have been overweight before to realise that it's okay to gain an extra 5, 6, 7% body fat in the period of gaining muscle. Like, it's okay. It doesn't mean that you've failed. It doesn't mean that you've let yourself go. It doesn't mean that you've taken steps backward. It's just part of the process that you need to accept. And I just think it's a really common thing that most people need to sort of get their head around and just think, look, just because you've lost weight and got abs, that doesn't mean you're finished. And it doesn't mean that if you lose those abs temporarily while you're building muscle, that you've started to fail again.
100%. But for me personally, I know that being a certain leanness makes me happy. It makes me uncomfortable. So there's always a point where an individual's going to say, do you know what, this is going to make me happy at this point in time. And if this goal is slower to achieve, then I'm kind of happy with that. And there's no right or wrong answer for an individual. Like, we could sit here as a coach and say, oh, well, you just need to block that out. You need to gain fat. Like, you need to do this. Like, it might just be that you go slower so you feel more comfortable, but you have to then also trust, the coach, the science, the process to say that actually we do need to have a certain amount of food to make the kind of progress that we expect within this, training block or phase of achieving more muscle mass, etc.
Oh, definitely. I'm not promoting the bulk of like the 90s or anything like that. Like, that's objectively a bad idea. But what I am saying is that most people can gain muscle. Well, I think it was Alan Aragon in Girth Control. I'm sure he wrote this, but basically, a healthy male can gain somewhere in the region of 20 pounds of lean body mass in their first year. And then after that, it roughly halves year on year. So muscle gain does slow down dramatically. But if you're wanting to build muscle, you're going to have to gain some weight. And all I'm trying to say is that if you're trying to build muscle and you're gaining less than like a kilogram a month, it's too slow and you're not making progress. Now, if you're happy with not necessarily building as much muscle, I'm specifically talking to people who do want to build muscle. If you're just wanting to get stronger, if you're wanting to get fitter, and then if a bit of muscle gain comes along with that, then great. Like, if that's you, then that's fine. But if you're saying, well, I would like bigger arms, bigger chest, bigger legs, and you're also at the same time trying to make sure that you don't gain more than a kilo or so above where you are at the minute, that is going to mean that you're spinning your wheels. Because while you can recomposition, so it is very possible to gain muscle and lose fat at the same time, the leaner you are and the more muscular you are, the more difficult that becomes to do. And also, it's a very, very, very slow process. I think slower than most people realise. So, yeah, you might be happy with the slow progress, and if you are, that's absolutely great. But also, physiologically, there will be a point at which it doesn't happen anymore, and that point isn't as advanced as many people would like it to be. So I do just want to be sure that people just think about it a little bit. If you have been overweight before, and say you've got down to 75 kilos, and you're wanting to build muscle, just know that if you gain up to 80 kilos again over the next 2-3 months, that's progress, and it's something that you should embrace, and it's something that you should aim for, rather than thinking, well, I was 75 kilos, God, I've got up to 77 kilos now, I might need to diet, I'm starting to lose my abs a little bit. Like, if that's taken a week to do, yeah, you've blown it. But if that's taken 2 months, or even if it's taken like 6 weeks, then just embrace that part of the process, because you can't be lean all the time if your goal is to build muscle. If it's not, grand, but if it is, you do need to accept some amount of fat gain. But again, just to be clear, I'm not telling you to just go and eat a bunch of cheeseburgers and Krispy Kreme and get really fat. That's also a bad idea.
God damn it. Just a final point around training and stuff, because we talked about kind of intensity earlier. One problem I see a lot of people doing when we get a bit further into the journey, so let's say we're 3-4 years plus into our fitness journey, there's this dilemma of like, how do we make progress? And a lot of people just keep accumulating volume, and I think it's a really bad mistake. I think people need to learn how to maintain intensity rather than just accumulate volume all the time, largely because I see it ends up having a detrimental effect on people's lifestyle. So if we just try and train all the time, you might get a bit tired, beat up, work's busy, couple of nights bad sleep, that kind of stuff. So I would much rather say to people, look, instead of trying to spin your wheels, trying to maintain 5 to 6 training sessions a week, how about we train 3 or 4 times a week, but we make those 3 or 4 sessions really high quality, really high intensity. We pack the volume into those sessions and learn how you can keep applying intensity into your training, because ultimately intensity is what tells a muscle to adapt. Like if we don't stress that muscle in a new way, then it's going to be hard to make progress. And if you're trying to have so much volume over a prolonged period of time, and as Tom picked up earlier, you're not cycling your training volume enough, you don't have deload periods, then you're really going to struggle to send that signal to the muscle to say, get stronger, get bigger, get faster, whatever that signal is. So I think rest and recovery is really important for a lot of people, and you need to stand back and see where you're at on that scale and say, right, am I recovering enough so that when I go in the gym on Monday, I can go balls out for an hour, hour and a quarter, however long you're training, and say, right, back at the gym on Wednesday, applying the same level of intensity? Because I know if I train really hard for like 3 days in a row, my third workout is way less intensity than Monday, because I just haven't got enough in the tank. Like my body just wants a bit of a rest. So I'd much rather train a little bit less in terms of the days in the week, but have the same intensity and volume on those days, because my quality is just there.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I've trained 6 days a week for a really long time, and I've just recently dropped down to 5 days a week, and I can tell already that my intensity's increased, which is nice, because it's nice to know that when you program a new training block that it works. But I think just on that, there was a bunch of research came out a few years ago that basically indicated that volume is the most important thing for hypertrophy. So essentially, as long as you're training somewhere close to failure, you can build muscle whether you are doing sets of 3 or sets of 20, as long as you're somewhere close to failure, and the progress will be the same if the volume is equated. So volume is sets times reps times weight, if that makes sense. But I think within that, the message has definitely been lost that actually volume is only really important for hypertrophy on the assumption that the intensity is there, and on the assumption that progressive overload is being used. Like Ben mentions, you will build significantly more muscle training 3 times per week if training 3 times per week allows you to add 20 kilos to your 8 rep max on the squat, if training 6 times a week just left you squatting the same weight all the time. You're far better off doing something that allows you to add more weight to the bar than you are just accumulating volume over time and just basically going in, getting a pump and getting fatigued. Because while having a pump feels nice, and while you may feel like you're doing the fitness thing a bit more, we need to remember that the reason that we're training is not because we want to be in the gym and because we enjoy it, although we probably do. The reason that we're training is because we're trying to get better at it. If you're wanting to do something that you just enjoy, then I would recommend you pick up something like a martial art, because the thing is with like a martial art or with even yoga and stuff like that, practice gets you better at it. Being in the gym, that's about doing something hard and then recovering so you can get better at it. You don't need to practice as much to squat, for example, as you do to hit all of the poses in yoga. So if you're just enjoying movement, which is brilliant and I do recommend, I would say potentially drop from 5-6 days a week to 3-4 days a week and increase that intensity. Bear in mind, I am talking only if you're not currently progressing. If you're doing something and it's working, don't change it. But if you're training 5-6 days a week because you enjoy the movement and you enjoy it, but you're finding that you're not progressing, consider picking up another activity for 2 of those days and just treat your gym time as what it is, which is hard work that you need to recover from and improve.
100%. Right, I could go off in another 10 tangents. So, Tom, we've got to leave the podcast there because I actually have to shoot off to London, and this show has to go to the editor, otherwise it won't be up tomorrow. So then we'll be in trouble with everyone else.
Yeah, let's not do that.
So I hope you've enjoyed this conversation. If you see it pop up on the internet, on Facebook, Instagram, etc., get involved in the conversation. Like, me and Tom are always happy to share stories. Like, if you feel that you've listened to this and you're like, okay, actually my situation's kind of similar, and you want to evolve a conversation, then evolve a conversation. We'll have a chat. It's all good. Obviously, Tom's musings are incredible. If you want to listen to more of Tom's musings, make sure you follow the BTNacademy online. So whether you go to BTNacademy on the URL, like that is our URL, btn.academy, then sign up to our email newsletter. Make sure you're following on Facebook, because that's where Tom inputs his musings alongside myself. If you are looking at coaching and you think you need help, you're more than welcome to get coaching by me. The only way I do it is through Fat Loss for Life, my 90-day body and mind transformation program. It's the only way you can get coached by me. Otherwise, check out a lot of the information that we've got online. Like, we're always posting on Facebook. We're always posting all over the place. So do have a look. Right, Tom, let's go.
Let's go. Let's do it. Thanks for listening, everyone. I do appreciate it.
100%. And by the way, if you've never left us a review on iTunes, we'd really appreciate it. Anyway, have an awesome day. We will be back very soon. Goodbye. Whoa, just before you go, couple of things. Firstly, if you need my help at any point in time, reach out to my Facebook fan page, ask a question, and I'll get back to you. The reason I like my Facebook fan page is because I can send like voice memos back, and it's really time efficient for me to be able to help as many people as possible. If you want to find out just anything I'm up to, keep abreast of social media, make sure you're on my email newsletter, and all of that info is at bencoomber.com. If you want nutrition education in the future, then have a look at the BTNacademy. That's our online nutrition courses. If you want to be coached by me, then join my 90-day body and mind transformation program, Fat Loss for Life. And if you're looking for clarity, honesty, simplicity, and research-proven supplements that taste awesome, then go to awesomesupplements.co.uk. That's my links. That's where to find me. That's where to find the cool stuff. I'm out. Have an awesome day. Everyone's under the table, cock jerking each other. Oh yeah, that was really funny. That was really brilliant. Oh, it was really great how you just gave one sentence answer to that person on Facebook. Yeah, they do need to go and count calories. The thing is, it's not helping anyone. This behaviour is not changing anything. It's just feeding into everyone being really narcissistic and out for themselves.